Okay, now we're going to talk about painting, and this chapter is all about techniques. So here we have Jasper Johns the flag, and he used encaustic, which is melted wax. You get these little bricks of different colored pigment. They're kind of like if you took a bunch of crayons and melted them. Each of them is like that, and then you get like a hot plate, and you melt it, and you smear it on the canvas with a brush or a palette knife, and it dries super fast, so you can work rapidly. So this painting is it's interesting because it's a painting of a flag, and it exists as a flag. Johns was a guy that was raised in rural Georgia, and he was honorably discharged from the army in the 50s, and he painted this painting in 1954 as a gay man living in New York City. So I think his relationship to patriotism is a little complicated. Johns is pretty oblique when it comes to talking about his work, but I think you can extrapolate that the painting a flag is kind of a celebration of the fact that we live in a place that you can paint a flag and make art about our country and patriotism. Now, usually when I think of frescoes, I think of Michelangelo and the Sistine Chapel. So to make a fresco, you mix up plaster and apply it to the wall. It's got to be perfectly flat. And then as the plaster's curing, you apply your pigment and water to it in such a way that the pigment adheres to the plaster forever and ever. Even Da Vinci had problems with The Last Supper, which is a fresco. He didn't really know how to do it right, and it was kind of a big experiment, so some parts are flaking off, and even while I was finishing it, it didn't come out perfect. So I wanted to show some contemporary frescoes. This is by Dan Merva, and he makes these little substrates, and then he coats them with plaster, or does that same process where he adds pigment, but you can see in some of the texture here with these brush marks, the thinness and then the opacity with the paint and how it mixed with the plaster. I think you get a real feel for that texture there. I look at these as experiments with the materials and color, you know, and just kind of playing with formalist ideas of what goes together, what doesn't go together, should I make it shiny or add more paint, all that kind of fun stuff. And the ones that are shiny have epoxy on them over them. And then this one has paint on top of the epoxy. Okay, the way you do egg tempera is you have to take an egg and then crack it and separate the yolk from the white. Then you throw out the egg white, you don't need that. And then you take the yolk and separate that into as many little containers as you're going to need for colors. So you only have as many colors on your palette as you have pigments that you bought. So if you have like red, blue, yellow, and green, that's all the pigments that you can paint with. Luckily, the cool thing about tempera is that it's really transparent. So you do a lot of optical mixing. So Yvette's work here is about making a new pantheon of gods. So this guy here is Saint Christopher, Anubis, and a coyote. You can also see she's referencing these older egg tempera paintings like Duccio with the distorted perspective and bizarre landscape and gold skyline. Okay, oil paint. This is my favorite. Obviously, I'm a painter. It's the most romantic. You have all these ideas of the painter alone in their studio, toiling away, creating their masterpiece. And that's how I think of Zach Koch's work. He's obsessed with old Renaissance portraits and British portraiture and Ong and all these other old masters. He mixes together art history and pop culture to make new images. So here you have Velasquez's portrait of Juan de Pareja and these rubicite elements, which is from EverQuest Online, massive multiplayer video game. Zach is also part of the vaporwave movement, as you can see here, with the bucolic landscape set against the 90s color palette backdrop, blue and pink. And here's more of that vaporwave influence, looking for that perfect blend of images to make the aesthetic you've always dreamed of. It's not just nostalgia, but it is a big part of it. So he's mixing and matching these elements of art history and pop culture to make new images. You can see that little guy from Dragon Ball Z down there, marble sculpture split in two, and that acidic background tied into the front image by the reflection on the marble statue's face. Okay, one last painting from Zach here. This one's just an amazing painting to have such crazy colors and elements going on, and it's just unified by composition, line, color, shape, all that stuff we talked about. Okay, acrylic is like oil paint, but obviously it's different. It's basically plastic with pigment mixed into it, so it dries way faster. It's cheaper, it doesn't smell bad. There's a million pre-made mediums for it. Mediums are things you can mix with paint to extend their usage. So this guy uses a lot of airbrush and multimedia elements in his paintings, so it can work a lot faster. There's also glass and glitter in this painting. And see that rope across the bottom? You get that kind of effect by putting the paint into like a syringe and then squirting it on there. Talk about texture. This painting has glitter, beads, and fabric in it. You can see that glove glued to the painting in the bottom left-hand corner. And all that paint on the hair above that big eared figure up top behind the beer glass. I think it's interesting how he has the figures digging into the surface of the painting too. So you have this kind of dialogue with the viewer that, hey, you're looking at a painting, don't forget. I like to share all these artists' Instagram handles because everyone I've talked to in the art world just keeps talking about how integral Instagram has become. Um, Talking to curators and gallery owners, and they just look at your Instagram page and scroll through there and decide really quickly if they're interested or not. All the artists I've shared are pretty active on Instagram, so if you're interested in this kind of stuff, you can follow them and find more about their practice and what they're like as people. And feel free to message them because everybody's like really open about talking about stuff.